today, for the first ship guide of the channel, I'll be discussing the South Carolina class of battleships of the United States Navy. The South Carolina's design first came into fruition when the British started concocting a design for a radically new type of ship, dreadnought battleship. The United States had a wonderful idea to create a battleship so powerful it would leave the British so in shock that they would have to ramp up production of the dreadnought 3 times over. And what the Navy came up with was this: the heavily outdated Connecticut class of pre dreadnought that barely had enough firepower whatsoever. This quote unquote premier battleship had 4 12-inch guns, 8 8-inch guns, and 12 17-inch 7-inch guns, my bad. Not to get anything wrong here, but the secondaries and the Connecticut's are pretty good, no lie. But the sheer assumption that this class of battleship could deal with the beast of a battleship at the time that was the dreadnought told the US Navy that they needed something better. The suggestion of the South Carolina class came from Naval Lieutenant Homer Poundstone. In December 1902, he wrote a paper for Theodore Roosevelt arguing that the Navy better increase its size of battleships, making the guns higher caliber and such. Later that year, Italian naval architect Vittorio Cumberti wrote in an article for Jane's Fighting Ships the ideal British battleship would be the dreadnought design. The next year, HMS Dreadnought was launched, marking a new era, the dreadnought era. Poundstone's design had been tested by the Naval War College later that year, seeing that the new design would be great at broadsides when fitted with 12-inch guns. The amount of a single broadside would be worth 3 battleships in service at the time. The design would be displacing 16,000 long tons, meaning that the newly named South Carolina class design would be around the same size as the pre-dreadnought Connecticut's, while sporting numerous secondaries with basic firepower. The South Carolinas were ready for construction later that year. The 2 ships in the class that were built were the South Carolina and Michigan. South Carolina was built by William Cramp and Sons of Philadelphia. Michigan was built by the New York Shipbuilding Corporation. Both keels were laid down in 1906. The ships were both launched in 1908, making the United States the third country to have a dreadnought battleship, just in front of Brazil and their Minas Gerais class of dreadnoughts. Both ships were assigned to the United States Atlantic Fleet. They had many cruises around the world from 1911 to 1915. They visited Kiel for the Kiel Woche, which is a sailing event held every year. Also in the United States Special Service Squadron, and cruised to Pensacola, New Orleans, Galveston, and even participated in the occupation of Veracruz in 1915. The South Carolinas sailed across the Atlantic during 1918 for the Treaty of Versailles as a show of power by the United States Navy. The South Carolina and Michigan were actually the first American battleships to return from Europe in wartime. By the time of the Washington Naval Treaty in 1922, the South Carolinas were severely outdated and no longer needed. The United States Navy had been building the Delaware class, Florida class, Wyoming class, and the massive New York class. So when the treaty was finally implemented, the South Carolinas were scrapped to free up extra tonnage. They were struck in 1923, and scrapping was finished in 1924. The most important thing about the South Carolina's legacy was the way that the guns were placed. Many ships came to use this design decades afterward. That's all for today. Stay tuned for more content coming soon.